The death of Unohana has been pretty controversial within the BLEACH community. She was the best healer within the Soul Society, and recently we had learnt that she was in fact a lethal killer who was a part of the original Gotei 13. But then she suddenly ended up being killed off just when the Soul Society needed her the most. This decision had made some people want to grab Kubo by the shoulders and scream at him, "What were you thinking?" The Quincy were literally at their doorstep and Shinigami were dropping left and right. Then Unohana is written out of the story not because she was defeated by the Quincy, but for a totally different reason altogether. When you look past fan outrage, you'll realize that the death of Unohana was an inevitability that was building up since the beginning of the story. The moment that a nameless child from Zaraki had first crossed blades with the original Kenpachi, her fate was sealed. So in this video, I'll be explaining why Unohana had to die in order to teach Kenpachi to stop holding back, and why it wouldn't have been a good idea for her to continue living. Kenpachi Zaraki's early years were spent wandering the lawless districts of the Soul Society. He had no name, family, or identity beyond the blade that he held in his hands. What had truly set him apart was that he was bored out of his mind. Every battle ended the same way. He had swung his sword, his opponent dies, and he moves on. He might as well have been swatting flies away. The young Kenpachi had reached the ceiling of available challenge in his environment, and his developing psyche was starving for more of a meaningful battle. He was so powerful at such a young age that he was isolated by his own skill. Nobody could relate to his experiences because nobody else was able to do what he could do. Then came that fateful day where he's standing on top of a pile of corpses as he spots a woman in the rain. Something about her appeared to be off. She didn't look afraid, nor did she run away or immediately attack him. For the first time in his life, he encountered someone who might actually understands what it means to crave a real fight. When their blades eventually did clash, the impossible happens. The woman was able to cut Kenpachi, which had resulted in a scar running down the left side of his face across his left eye. In return, Kenpachi had impaled her through the collarbone, leaving a scar behind, as these wounds were now marks of their shared destiny. During this battle, it was the first time that he had felt fear, and it was the first ever battle that he had enjoyed. This woman, of course, was Unohana Yachiru, the very first Kenpachi. What some people overlook is that even as a child, Kenpachi Zaraki was already stronger than her. His subconscious recognized this immediately, as he had started to subconsciously seal away his power in order for his battle against Unohana to last longer, but this had resulted in him losing to her. Also, if he were to have exerted his full power, he would have killed Unohana, thus losing the only person that could give him what he needs. Following their battle, Kenpachi wanted to fight like her as he started to admire her. Unohana Yachiru didn't change her name and become Unohana Retsu because she got bored of fighting. She ended up becoming the captain of the 4th Division and changing her identity to Unohana Retsu because she couldn't live with what she had done to the young Kenpachi Zaraki. Imagine being the strongest warrior of your generation, a master of 8,000 sword styles, and realizing that you've accidentally crippled someone with even greater potential by your own just by simply existing. The woman that we knew as the gentle captain of the 4th Division was living a lie. This wasn't out of maliciousness, but as a self-punishment. She buried her true identity so deep that most people forgot about the original Kenpachi's existence, but the guilt never really left Unohana. Every time that she had witnessed Zaraki struggle in a battle that he should have won easily, every time that he barely defeated opponents who were beneath his true capabilities, she was more than aware that it was her fault. She understood something that the audience didn't grasp until much later in the 1000-year Blood War arc, that Kenpachi wasn't fighting at diminished capacity because he lacked power. He was actually fighting in the way that he was because his psyche had identified her as the template for worthy opposition, and it automatically adjusted Kenpachi's power output to maintain this dynamic between him and Unohana. She had become a psychological anchor for him, a fixed point around which all of Kenpachi's limitations had revolved around. The reason why Unohana was so skilled with healing techniques was not because she had learned them to help others, but it was for her to extend her own fights, thus explaining why she fit into the role as the captain of the 4th Division. She was now trapped in this position which prevented her from fighting while at the same time preventing Kenpachi from reaching his full potential. Her very existence had become the problem that she needed to solve. Kenpachi's power suppression operates like a psychological thermostat, constantly adjusting to maintain optimal challenge levels. The eye patch that he wears also helps to regulate manipulate his spiritual pressure output, and the bells that he has in his hair are deliberate handicaps designed to give his opponents every possible advantage. Kenpachi's brain is hardwired to associate too much power with loss of meaningful connection or meaningful battle. Every time Kenpachi started to overwhelm an opponent too quickly, his subconscious would dial back the intensity in order to preserve the longevity of his battles. The result was a warrior who could never access his full potential because doing so triggered deep-seated abandonment fears. He'd rather barely win interesting fights than easily win boring ones, because barely winning meant the possibility of future challenges. This resulted in a feedback loop where he became addicted to fighting on the edge, mistaking struggle for strength and limitation for strategy. We see this in his various battles throughout Bleach, from him nearly losing to Ichigo, him also struggling against Noitara, and barely surviving his encounter with the Sternritter. These opponents were not equally matched, and the biggest shocker is him nearly losing to Ichigo. A lot of people think that this was a scathing mistake from the early chapters of Bleach and an oversight by Kubo, but it was in fact a piece of deliberate foreshadowing which hints at the limitations that Kenpachi imposes upon himself. Kenpachi wasn't actually fighting other people, he was fighting his own mind, which had refused to let him be truly dominant in battles. When it comes to the title of Kenpachi, there can only be one Kenpachi per generation. Unohana led to a bit of a paradox in the succession of Kenpachis. Every Kenpachi from the 2nd to the 10th was essentially not an official holder of the title. They might have killed the previous holder, but the original Kenpachi Yachiru Unohana was still alive. While Kenpachi was the holder of the 11th title, he did not officially inherit the title from Unohana. This is just one of the reasons why their final battle had to end in death. It was because that title needed to be inherited by him. Ever since their fight all those years ago when he was just a child, it was pretty much Kenpachi's title to have. Unohana's approach to fixing this wrong and breaking Kenpachi's limitations was pretty unconventional. She planned to repeatedly bring Kenpachi to the point of death and heal him up again. Every time that she almost killed him, his subconscious was forced to confront the exact scenario that it had spent years trying to avoid. This is the vulnerability that Kenpachi has against an opponent that he is unable to defeat. Every time that Kenpachi was revived, a piece of that subconscious limitation was removed. The way that Kenpachi's mind was regulating his power was recalibrated under extreme stress, as slowly those automatic limitations were being removed. Unohana was the only person who could do this for Kenpachi, as the task required someone with mastery over healing arts, as well as somebody who was strong enough to bring Kenpachi to the point of death. When Unohana activated her Bankai Minazuki, she announced that the gloves were off. We got to see the true Unohana underneath that facade. Kenpachi was finally able to battle against his idealized opponent at a full potential. It wasn't that Kenpachi learned how to become stronger in this fight. It was more so that he remembered what it felt like to fight without those psychological safety nets. He remembered to embrace the full terrifying scope of his capabilities without fearing the consequences. The brutality of this training is that once Kenpachi's authentic power had reawakened, Unohana was of course vulnerable to it. The child that had nearly killed her centuries ago was now an adult with the same raw potential, but vastly more experienced. With his limitations finally removed, Unohana's death was collateral damage. It was the inevitable result of Kenpachi being able to no longer hold back. The entire training within Mugen had freed Kenpachi, but it had also sealed Unohana's fate. This is the price that she had to pay for the sin that she had committed all those years ago. She was responsible for robbing Kenpachi of his full potential for centuries. The moment that Kenpachi was finally able to hear his Zanpakuto Nozarashi speak out its name, this is where everything had truly changed, as his Zanpakuto was finally able to acknowledge him as worthy of becoming its partner. Kenpachi gained something so incredible, but at the cost of the one person that he truly admired. Nozarashi's first words carry a profound amount of weight, as it says to him, "My voice has finally reached you." Nozarashi had been trying to reach Kenpachi for years, but it was blocked by the psychological limitations that he had imposed. Only when those barriers were removed could he build that authentic connection with his Zanpakuto. That scared young Kenpachi, who limited his own incredible power so as to not accidentally kill Unohana, he is now no longer at the mercy of those fears, that fear of losing a worthy opponent. moment. Following this training, we saw Kenpachi take part in several battles, as we understand the double-edged nature of him freeing himself from those limits. While yes, he can now access his full strength, but he also struggles to control it. Take for example his battle against Gerard, and how it ended with his own body tearing apart from the unleashing of his full power. His body wasn't conditioned to handle his own Bankai. The series established that it takes about 10 years from the activation of a Bankai for a Shinigami to master it. We know that the No Breathes from Hell one-shot chapter where Kenpachi appears in, this takes place 12 years following the defeat of Yhwach. So this means that he's had more than enough time to condition his body and to use his Bankai without losing control if we were to see Kenpachi again during the Hell arc. There's a bittersweet irony to the relationship between Kenpachi and Unohana. While Kenpachi gained everything that he could have wanted, unlimited strength, spiritual partnership with his Zanbakudo, and a way for him to authentically express himself, he at the same time lost the only person whose opinion had mattered the most to him. Unohana would never get to see Kenpachi fight as his true self, and she didn't witness the potential that she died to unlock. Everybody loves Unohana's character, and it's for this reason that people would have wanted her to stay alive and to take part in the second Quincy invasion. Aside from that training within Muken where she fights Kenpachi, we hadn't seen her battle any other opponent in the series. So this was the perfect opportunity for Unohana to unleash her power against the Quincy. This leads to fans wondering, wasn't there another way for Kubo to unlock Kenpachi's power while still keeping Unohana alive? The problem with Unohana staying alive is that if she was accessible, then Kenpachi's subconscious would have continued using her as a benchmark for power regulation. I'm almost certain that all of that training with Unohana where those limitations were removed, they would have eventually returned if Kenpachi did not kill her. While she was alive, Kenpachi was pretty much anchored to her existence. She was the psychological trigger to Kenpachi's subconscious. Kenpachi needed to eliminate the source in order to truly be free. Other opponents couldn't provide what Unohana could because they lacked that history with Kenpachi. Those limitations were formed when Kenpachi was a child and when he had fought Unohana all those years ago. This is why nobody else could have trained Kenpachi other than her. The person who created the problem was the only one who was in the position to solve it. Even if another method did exist, Unohana herself wouldn't have accepted it. There can only truly be one Kenpachi in a given era. This was Kubo telling us that only one of them would survive. If Kenpachi failed his training, then yes, sure, he would have died and Unohana would have joined the battlefield as the new 11th captain. That's the only situation where I see Unohana having survived the fight. There is no way in which both Unohana and Kenpachi live. You have to appreciate that Unohana had a profound amount of guilt for stunting Kenpachi's growth to the point where she changed everything about her life. She abandoned the 11th division, she took on a new role as the leader of the 4th division, and she didn't partake in a single fight ever since her battle with the young Kenpachi. Training Kenpachi and walking away would have felt like an incomplete punishment. This was the price that Unohana had to pay and she was fully aware of it. During Core 3 of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, we see an anime exclusive scene where Ukitake is speaking to Unohana. This is right after the death of head captain Yamamoto as they mourn his loss. During this conversation, there are hints that Unohana was aware that she was going to lose her life, and it does appear as though Shunsui and Ukitake knew what was going to happen to her too. Unohana was an incredible character, and I don't think that her death was a waste. With the reveals from the No Beats from Hell one-shot chapter, as we learn that Yamamoto, Unohana, and Ukitake have been sent to Hell, I don't think that this is the last time that we'll see her. Unohana didn't die as Unohana Retsu the healer, she died as Unohana Yachiru, the original Kenpachi. She was able to pass on the title of Kenpachi to its rightful owner. Following this, she accepted her death, being content that she had resolved all of her matters. It's nice to want to preserve beloved characters and recognizing that they could have done more in the story, but when it's time for a character to go, nobody better than the author can make that decision. But yeah, we have reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you think about the death of Unohana? Do you think that she had to die in order to teach Kenpachi to stop holding back? What are your own theories for an alternative way where both Kenpachi and Unohana could have survived? Do you agree with my own take that Unohana had to die? and the only way that she could have survived that training in Muken is if Kenpachi had died and Unohana had become the new 11th captain. Yeah, I am looking forward to reading all your thoughts on this one, so definitely continue the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next one.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.